Now we have a guest also joining us, Ramiro Fuentes from Los Angeles, political analyst. Hello, Ramiro. Hope you're safe and doing well out there. You've seen the protests. I'm sure you're on social media every day for the last going on the second week now, and you see the sentiments of the people and what they think of what's happening in Gaza. You take to Facebook, Instagram. You see one or two posts supporting Israel. You see hundreds, but then you hear these politicians, Ramiro. You get a whole different take from them. They're saying, "Oh, Israel has a right to defend itself." They don't talk about the occupation. They don't talk about the Palestinians' rights to defend themselves. It's wild the stark difference you see online, and then what you see on mainstream media. You're taking all the protests and what's taking on place in Gaza.
That's exactly right. I think we're seeing a huge shift between what mainstream media, the elites in Washington are telling us, versus what the mass majority of people across the United States believe. Washington, Wall Street, mainstream media, Silicon Valley, these are all companies and institutions that are run by the same people who run Israel, the media giants, the oil tycoons, the banking elites who run the global economy. The average working class people in the United States are suffering just like people in Palestine. Obviously, people in Palestine are suffering to a much degree. But let's not forget that all of the tactics that the Israelis use on the Palestinians, the stop and frisk, the violence, the targeting, the bombings, the drone attacks, the racist attacks on the Palestinian people, these are all being used on black, brown, colonized, working class people in the United States. One of the biggest supporters of police in the United States is the state of Israel. In fact, the NYPD has its biggest office in Tel Aviv internationally. And so what we're seeing is a connection between the average working class person in the US, both in the cities and in the rural areas. I think one thing that after the election, after this division between the Republicans and the Democrats, positive thing that we're seeing is that people in the urban areas who are working class, but also people in rural areas who maybe have voted for Trump, everyone is united in their opposition to wars. Nobody wants a new war. Everybody wants Israel and the United States to stop bombing Gaza and Palestine, because we know that these two empires are built on racism, built on debt, built on violence, and people are fed up with that and tired of that. And I think that while the situation in Gaza is horrible, I mean, we're talking about innocent families, babies being killed, children with PTSD, families who are just trying to get by, trying to survive after Ramadan, some horrible stuff that's going on. I think this is also on many fronts around the world who may not have had a lot in common before this. The person in the rural America who is upset at the wars, a veteran who came home from fighting overseas for Israel's wars, is just as upset at the bombing of Gaza as somebody in an urban area, an Arab immigrant, a Muslim immigrant. And so although there's some really huge trauma and violence being inflicted on the Palestinian people, we also have to use this opportunity to build unity between the peoples of different countries, the Iranian people, the Muslim people, Black and Latino people in the United States, to oppose Israel, to oppose Zionism, and to oppose U.S. imperialism.
And Ramiro, you think we'll see it in our lifetime, you and I? You think we'll see some politicians to call it how it is, to exactly not spin this thing to what it's not, and exactly outline it the way it is, and stand up regardless of how much Zionist money is come or supported them to get to where they are politically in America?
I think it's very possible that in our lifetime we may see a break with the empires of the U.S. and Israel, or at least people in the U.S., a growing movement against the U.S. establishment. I mean, I can't point to a single popular young person or figure or politician who is pro-Israel.
Ramiro,
the youth,
hold on 1 second. I'll let you continue. I'm just we just changed images there. We went from a protest in Washington D.C. Now these are live images of the Gaza skyline. It's obviously night, and you guys just moments earlier, you guys leaving or coming into Gaza. You saw something on your screen there. I just want to let you know where we're at now, what we're viewing, so you can pay attention to that. That's a live image coming in out of Gaza. Go ahead, Ramiro.
We're seeing a huge culture shift in the United States. It used to be in the 90s and the early 2000s, and I remember this myself, that backing and supporting Israel was mainstream and popular. Nowadays, it's the establishment that supports Israel. It's mainstream media that supports Israel. And as we know, there's a huge change where people are no longer looking to Washington or Wall Street or to mainstream media for their political views. And I think people across the United States have woken up to the fact that is hurting not only the people of Palestine, but people in the United States. There's a shared connection. The same prisons that are being constructed in the United States to lock up black and brown people, those same companies are invested in building prisons in the West Bank and Gaza. These are the same companies that are invested in using drones to attack Palestinians. And so now that there's a shared connection, I think that we're going to see a growing grassroots movement from the base here in the United States opposing Israel, because not only is it killing people, but it's also hurting the financial ability of a lot of people in the United States. And I think Israel is backed up in a corner. I think the fact that Israel's entire basis ideology, which again is different from, anti-Zionism is different from anti-Semitism, although a lot of Israel supporters like to claim that those of us who oppose Israel are anti-Semitic or anti-Zionist. Zionism is based on this racist hatred of Muslims, of Arabs, of people who are not Jewish, who view us as not equal to them, as being inferior. And that's why we're seeing that expressed today in their treatment of Palestinians, where they don't treat Palestinians as human beings. And people don't like that. That's not really popular with people around the world. People want equality and peace. And I think Israel has backed itself up into a corner, which also concerns me as well, because we've heard in the past Israel talk about taking the world with. If Israel goes down, the world goes down. And we have to remember, Israel also has nuclear weapons. Israel has a large military arsenal. And so I think Israel has backed itself up into a corner. The world is watching Israel, and we have to be very careful with Israel's next move, because we're talking about people who view themselves as superior, as the chosen people, as untouchable, and now their time is up. Now, their judgment day is here, and I think the world is seeing what they've done.
Ramiro, I'm glad you mentioned nuclear weapons. Shouldn't we be concerned that someone that, we don't have much time left. You got to do this. Give me this back in exactly a minute or less. But when we see they're capable of being this irresponsible with weapons of mass destruction, with precision-guided, and they're able to use this kind of disproportionate force on women and children, on residential infrastructure, how concerned should we be that they have hundreds of undeclared nuclear weapons in their stockpile?
We should be extremely concerned that Israel has all of these weapons. Israel always likes to point the finger at Iran and say, we have to disarm Iran. They're the violent ones. What are they going to do? Israel's already the one carrying out the violence. They're the aggressor, and we should all be concerned, and that's why we should all oppose U.S. supporting Israel.
Thanks for joining us. Ramiro Fuentes are joining us out of Los Angeles. We'll be following this Israeli attacks on Gaza very closely right here on PressTV. Everyone stay tuned, and goodbye for now.